The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
You're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Tuesday night, May 23rd, 2017. Thanks you so much for joining us. There's a lot happening in the news that we want to cover tonight. But as with any other show, I want to begin the show by thanking all of our patrons without whom we cannot do this. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for making this possible in the midst of YouTube apocalypse, where all of our ad revenue has been cut dramatically. So patrons are more valuable more than ever. And in exchange, obviously, we have a community. We've built a community of patrons, and just about every morning I do a morning analysis live stream that I share with the live stream on Facebook, and then we archive it on YouTube. For those of you who don't like Facebook, I get it. I understand. We even give you an audio version of it. So there's a lot of bonus content that you can get by becoming a patron, where we discuss some things that we may not even get to on the show. But you can become a part of this family by going to patreon.com/the BPD show. We want to follow up on a couple of stories from last night and a lot of breaking news today. We want to pick up with the tragedy out of Manchester. We want to discuss the op-ed in the Washington Post by Seth Rich, his family, his parents. They penned an op-ed in the Washington Post today amidst all of the controversy that's going on around his story. If you remember, Seth Rich is the DNC staffer who was killed in D.C. And there's a lot of stories, conspiracy/controversy, just a lot that's happening with that story. We want to cover that as well. So we'll get to all of that and more. If you want to weigh in on any of our conversations at all, as always, you can call 857-600-0518. Or you can leave your comments in the comment section, and we will incorporate them into our show and give you some live feedback. So again, that's 857-600-0518. Let's begin with the Manchester bombing. As we discussed last night, 22 people have been killed at a concert, at an Ariana Grande concert. Last night we discussed the fact that it's very likely going to involve a lot of casualties from children, from young people. One of the youngest people mentioned was an 8-year-old who was killed at this concert. Police have identified Salam Abedi. They've said that he is responsible. He's a 22-year-old who lived within the area. Theresa May, Prime Minister Theresa May, said in a statement that she was, quote, increasing the threat level from severe to critical, meaning that not only that an attack remains highly likely, but that a further attack may be imminent. So in part of moving the threat level from severe to critical, it includes armed military personnel taking roots, becoming a part of the normal atmosphere there in London. And actually the mayor, Sadiq Khan, he told residents to expect to see armed officers and military personnel on the streets. And so this is where they have gone there in the aftermath of this bombing. Sadiq Khan also said that, quote, they are there to help our police service to keep us safe and guard key sites. This has, we didn't discuss this last night, but ISIS has claimed responsibility for this tragedy, for this terrorist attack. And a part of them claiming responsibility of it is they identify the victims as militants, as enemies of theirs. This has now not only has ISIS. Let me take a step back. ISIS has a propensity of claiming, taking credit for things that they haven't done. But in this case, U.S. intelligence, they also have not yet confirmed that was ISIS. So we're still in this gray area of whether or not ISIS is actually responsible for it. But in many ways, what happens is if they want to take credit for it, then fine. You take credit for killing young girls attending a concert and killing them, children. You could take credit for that because that continues to, it adds to the invalidation of any sense of nobility, if there ever was a sense. And the reason I put it like that is because many of the people who sign up, if you look at the documentaries and you read the articles and you look at the investigations around ISIS, people sign up because they see something in ISIS. What it is, I don't know. But there seems to be an affinity for people to identify with this desire to build a Islamic caliphate. And taking responsibility for the killing and the murder of young girls and young boys only serves to undermine any idea of validity that may be festering in the mind of some impressionable young person who would go to sign up for ISIS. But then on the flip side, it also mobilizes people against them in a very significant fashion. I think it's safe to say that everyone looks at ISIS as a threat that needs to be rooted out, undermined, and destroyed. And not only ISIS in terms of the militants, but the channels that created ISIS, the funding that supports ISIS, the relationships that we have not fleshed out that actually perpetuate the ideologies that support ISIS. In every way imaginable, we need to gut them out of our society. And any other commentary around it, we can discuss at another time, maybe even later on this show, the responsibility of the United States, the responsibility of other partners, the responsibility that we hold in these tragedies, in the formation or at least the sustaining of ISIS. We could talk about that, but right now there are young people who are dead because of these attacks. One thing that I want to point out is a comment made by President Trump. President Trump made a comment today with regard to ISIS that it may surprise you in the audience, but I actually 100% agree with. I want to play the video, and the context of the video is he's speaking in Bethlehem following a meeting with Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, and he had this to say in regards to ISIS.
So many young, beautiful, innocent people living and enjoying their lives murdered by evil losers in life. I won't call them monsters because they would like that term. They would think that's a great name. I will call them from now on losers because that's what they are. They're losers.
Like I said before, when I agree, when I think Donald Trump has said or done something correct, I'm going to let you know. And I think this is probably the most effective term to describe ISIS because it undermines any sense of anything. They are losers. They are, and it seems, yes, it is a childhood taunt. It is a schoolyard taunt. Yes, I get that. But when you describe them as monsters, that validates who they are. They want to be seen as monsters. Donald Trump is right here. He is absolutely correct. They want to be seen as monsters. They want to be seen as a menacing threat, when in reality, the best way to describe them is a collection of losers, rejects from society who have to gather themselves together around some philosophical, ideological wet dream to assuage their pain and their dismay that in life they really are nobody. They are losers. So in this regard, Donald Trump is 100% absolutely correct. And I co-sign with the President of the United States in this regard, that we should not refer to ISIS as terrorists. We should not refer to them as monsters. We should not give anything to them that they want. They are losers. 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on the conversation. Let's talk about some of the other stories that are happening today. Michael Flynn. I wanted to talk about this last night, but we ran out of time. The Senate Intelligence Committee has announced 2 subpoenas against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. This is according to ABC News. They're seeking to have him to turn over documents related to his contact with the Russians. He has And on yesterday, he pleaded the fifth and said that he would not himself testify before these committees. But he's trying to extend, he and his lawyers are trying to extend this immunity, this not immunity, but this pleading of the fifth. They're trying to extend it to the documentation. And in many ways, this perhaps is going to lead to him being held in contempt. Mark Warner, the Democratic co-chair of the committee, said, while we disagree with General Flynn's interpretation of taking the fifth, it's even more clear that a business does not have the right to take a fifth if it's a corporation. One subpoena has been served. One is in the process of being served. He went on to say that we would like to hear from General Flynn. We'd like to see his documents. We'd like to tell him, for him to tell his story, because he publicly said, I've got a story to tell. And so there are two subpoenas that are being directed towards Michael Flynn, towards his businesses. They're trying to see any ties that he actually has with Russia. They're trying to carry out this investigation. And by him resisting, not so much resisting the testimony, but in this case, resisting turning over any of this information, Michael Flynn actually stands a chance of being held in contempt of Congress. Now, this is not a It depends on what type of penalty they carry with this. With the criminal offense that's called the contempt of Congress, there's a penalty of no less than 1 month to 12 months in jail, and then $100 at the low end and $1,000 at the high end. So the financial penalty is nothing, but he could face a minimum of 30 days in jail, and they have the ability to hold him in contempt multiple times. And so it could become a recurring process where he will be held in contempt of Congress time and time and again, because he does not want to turn over these documents. Again, this is not whether or not he's going to come and testify, but whether or not he has the authority or the legal authority to use pleading of the fifth to absolve him from having to turn over his documentation is something that has to be resolved. And once it's resolved, they would determine whether or not he will be held in contempt. All right, let's we'll come back to this other story. So I do want to talk about the CIA Brennan testimony, Director of National Intelligence Dan Coates. I want to talk about those stories. We'll talk about them in a minute. I want to jump into the story about Seth Rich. We mentioned it briefly at the top of the show. Seth Rich is the DNC staffer who was killed, and the circumstances surrounding his murder, it has not been solved. Let's put it like that. They have described it as a botched robbery, and by they, I mean the DC police. They have described it as a botched robbery. But from the time of his death, there have been many speculations as to what really happened. And there have been theories, whether you want to call them conspiracy theories or not. I'll leave that to you, and I'm sure I will qualify it in a minute. But there have been theories that suggest that this was some type of punitive action because Seth was the individual who tied or who released the emails to WikiLeaks, the DNC emails, the Podesta emails. The theory as it goes is that Seth Rich was the person who turned this over to WikiLeaks. Now, this has been an ongoing story for a while. It did subside for a while. It went away for a while, but it came back to life with a Fox News report that we discussed in detail last week or 2 weeks ago. And the Fox News report quoted a private investigator by the name of Rod Wheeler. Rod Wheeler is a private investigator, and he claimed to have additional information or more evidence that suggested that, in fact, that Seth was the individual who released this information to WikiLeaks. Now, the flip side of this accusation or this claim is that if Seth was the one who released this information to WikiLeaks, then it precludes the possibility of Russia being involved. I don't necessarily agree with that conclusion, but this is how the logic goes. So Rod Wheeler, a private investigator who happens to be a Fox News contributor, weighed into the conversation and brought this story back to life. The story slowly but surely picked up steam. It was picked up by Fox News, the national outlet, and Fox News, the national outlet, was actually the organization that identified Rod Wheeler as a Fox News contributor. He is a Fox News contributor, and that matters because it gives him access and the ability to promote this story to the level that it was promoted. But it went further than that. It went so far as to getting WikiLeaks to retweet the information about the private investigator finding new information. But the story started to fall apart, and it fell apart in a spectacular fashion. Rod Wheeler began to recant some of the things that he stated and said that he was really speaking on behalf of information that had been given to him by the local Fox News affiliate. This was 2 weeks ago. This was what we discussed 2 weeks ago. But it did not stop the momentum of the story from picking up speed and picking up steam. It actually got wind, it got picked up by Newt Gingrich. He picked it up and began floating it on air. And then last but not least, Sean Hannity of Fox News began to promote this story in a very significant fashion, such that it elicited a response from the Rich family. The Rich family put out a series of statements. They wrote a letter to the producers of Sean Hannity's show, essentially asking them to cease and desist with promoting and promulgating these conspiracy theories. These are their words, conspiracy theories, because it continues to hurt the family. It actually gets worse. It gets worse because now Sean Hannity, who has a major platform, everybody listening to me now knows who Sean Hannity is. Millions and millions of viewers, millions and millions of followers who listen to everything that Sean Hannity says. He began to promote an individual by the name of Kim.com. And it may seem like we're getting into the weeds here, but it's very important for us to identify all the players in this so that when you see this letter from the family, you can understand the extent of their frustration and the extent of their pain. Sean Hannity, with millions of followers, millions of viewers daily, he began to promote Kim.com, and Kim.com is an individual who said he had definitive evidence that Seth Rich was the person who turned over information to WikiLeaks. There's an exchange on Twitter. You could go check it out. But essentially, Sean Hannity not only co-signed this, but he promoted it. And he promoted it to the point where it became national news. It became national news to the point where every media outlet began reporting on it. Everyone, every journalist of any substance began reporting on it, not on the possibility of this being a conspiracy and a cover-up, but on the fact that a major reporter, a major commentator, Sean Hannity, with Fox News, is delving over into a conspiracy theory for which the family themselves have asked him to stop. And it came to a climax today with two things. On today, Kim.com released his statement, which was supposed to be a smoking gun, was supposed to be the definitive evidence that demonstrates that he himself could verify and prove that Seth Rich was the leaker to WikiLeaks. And instead, when you clicked on his site, you didn't see the statement right away. Instead, what you saw was a promotion, a series of promotions that you'll see now on your screen, promoting an album called The Good Life. And then the second panel said he's promoting an album called Good Times. This is Kim.com right there, the guy with the flower. And then you say, okay, well, maybe it's underneath the next thing. No, it's the next album, To Be With You. This is on Kim.com right now. And you say, well, maybe it's after that. No, the next one is The Raid. Watch the video now. And they say, okay, well, somewhere on this website of all these wonderful graphics, you will see a statement. And then finally, you get to Seth Rich was a hero. I know that Seth Rich was involved in the DNC leak. I know this because in late 2014, a person contacted me about helping me to start a branch of the Internet Party in the United States. He called himself Panda. I now know that Panda was Seth Rich. Panda advised me that he was working on a voter analytics tool and other technologies and that the Internet Party may be helpful. I communicated with Panda on a number of topics, including corruption and the influence of corporate money in politics. He goes on to describe this relationship that he allegedly had with Seth Rich, but nothing in this statement that he piped up for almost 72 hours, nothing in this statement was remotely the smoking gun that he got Sean Hannity wrapped up in, hyped up, sharing it on Fox News, sharing it on all of his social media platforms, saying that the smoking gun is coming. And instead of getting a smoking gun, we got a motherfucking mixtape. That's what we got. We got someone promoting a damn mixtape on the back of a dead man. That, my friends, is some charlatan shit. That is grifter. That's grifty McGrift. I mean, this is the most blatant, obscene usage of someone who has been murdered for the self-promotion. And everybody's like, well, Ben, this is his website. You know, he can do what he wants to with his website. Like, what's important is that he had the statement. Number one, the statement had no substance whatsoever. I almost feel bad for Sean Hannity, but Sean Hannity can go to hell because he should have been skeptical enough to reserve judgment. And any responsible commentator, journalist, blogger, I don't care what you call yourself, anybody responsible would have been patient and skeptical enough to reserve judgment until they saw what this man, Kim.com, had to offer. And when I saw to be honest, full transparency, the first thing I saw was a statement. Someone took a screenshot and I took a look at the statement and I'm like, the statement really doesn't say anything. And I was willing to leave it there until I went to the website myself and I had to scroll through advertisement after advertisement after advertisement to get to a statement of nothing. That was climax 1 today. Climax number 2 was the family themselves having to come out, and they wrote in, the parents wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post. And I want to read a couple of quotes from, this is what they said. They said that we know that Seth's personal email and his personal computer were both inspected by detectives early in the investigation, and that the inspection revealed no evidence of any communications with anyone at WikiLeaks or anyone associated with WikiLeaks. They went on to say, nor did that inspection reveal any evidence that Seth had leaked DNC emails to WikiLeaks or to anyone else. Indeed, those who have suggested that Seth's role as a data analyst at the DNC gave him access to a wide trove of emails are simply incorrect. They went on to say, despite these facts, our family's nightmare persists. Seth's death has been turned into a political football. Every day we wake up to the new headlines, new lies, new factual errors, new people approaching us to take advantage of us and Seth's legacy. It just won't stop. They go on to say the amount of pain and anguish this has caused us is unbearable. With every conspiratorial flare-up, we are forced to relive Seth's murder, and a small piece of us dies as more of Seth's memory is torn away from us. Shame on every single one of you opportunistic conspiratorial shields and grifters who are using this man's death to promote your conspiracy theory and your agenda against the DNC. I've got beef with the DNC and I've got the receipts to show it. Go check my backlog. But taking it to this point where the family had to pen this op-ed in the first place should make you go back into the dregs of society from whence you came, hide there, and never show your face again. If you're supporting Kim.com at this point, not only should you go to hell, but you should be ripped of any influence in the conversation, in the national conversation, in the local conversation, because you are an opportunistic shill who wants to use the death, not even just the death, but the pain of the family that has survived Seth. You are using that pain for your own personal, validation, vindication, promotion. What are you getting out of this? The fact that you're trying to prove that Russia had nothing to do with the DNC leaks? Fine, you could try to prove that, but at some point you have to, not you, people who have a conscience, people who have some sense of shame will take a step back and say, if the family themselves have to write an op-ed like this, then far be it for us to continue to promote these conspiracy theories when the family, the people who are closest to the investigation themselves. But sadly, I've actually seen people say that the family has been co-opted. I've seen people say that the family has been, they're like we're really seriously going into 9/11 truthers. We're going into Sandy Hook deniers. We're going into Alex Jones territory at this point. And you continue to be what the family describes as the people who make this unbearable for them to move on. We do not know who killed Seth Rich. But at some point, we should accept the family's word on this, that if they feel that this was not some vast conspiracy to punish Seth for leaking this information. In fact, in the op-ed, it even discusses the fact that he was taking a job with Hillary Clinton. He was in the op-ed in the Washington Post. He's talking about the fact that he was getting ready to move to New York to take a 4-month job with Hillary Clinton, and he was excited about that. But somehow, some way, this is going to be incorporated into the conspiracy that says that Hillary Clinton had Seth Rich killed. There is an intersection. Sometimes I believe in the horseshoe theory, sometimes I don't. But there is clearly an intersection between the left and the far right on this story. When you see an alliance between people like Sean Hannity and people who call themselves progressives, we've gone into a space that we should take a step back from, take a look at it holistically and say, maybe, just maybe, we should take a pause and let the family of Seth Rich heal. 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on the discussion. I actually just feel like ending the show. But we'll take some callers. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Yeah, my name's Jason Shiner from Columbus, Ohio.
Jason, what's on your mind, man?
I enjoyed listening. I was just listening to your bit there on Seth Rich, and I think that you make some good points. I may disagree with you on some of them, but I guess one of the things I'm curious about is, doesn't it bother you the fact that when he was supposedly robbed, he didn't take his $1,000 necklace or watch or his wallet, and he was shot twice in the back?
According to the family, his watch was broken off, and this is in the op-ed from the Washington Post today. Go take a look at it, and they describe the belongings, some of his belongings, not all of his belongings, but some of his belongings were abandoned away from where he was shot. This is according to the op-ed that was written by the parents. Do I feel that is, listen, here's the thing with any story. I am extremely agnostic. I am not going to jump on either side of the bandwagon. Do I think that there's some possibility in America for there to be a cover-up and a murder? Yeah. This is America. We kill people pretty good in America. But it's also there's also a space in our life to listen to the family, the people who are actually closest to him, who reject this idea, not just because they want to reject it, but based on the evidence that they've seen. Now, I mean, there's any murder that is unsolved bothers me. But what bothers me more about this, and I appreciate the call, what bothers me the most about this is the fact that people are genuinely interested in this story because of the political implications, not because of the loss of life. That's what bothers me about this. And everyone who's saying, I am Seth Rich, they will stop saying it as soon as they found, or as soon as they accepted evidence that it doesn't implicate the Democratic Party. This is a political football. And this does not mean that, this does not absolve the possibility or preclude the possibility that the DNC had something to do with it. But at some point, good Lord, I mean, we believe what we want to believe. And to me, I just don't believe anything. I don't believe anything except the need for us to respect the wishes of this family. That's what I think is important in this story. Respect the wishes of the family, the people. Here's what I would ask the audience. If it bothers you that not all of his belongings were taken, so it bothers you that it may be a robbery, should it not also bother you that the family, the people who are closest to this, the people who want to get a resolution the most, wouldn't it bother you that they don't buy into this theory because of the evidence that they've seen? I mean, if we're going to give credence to the idea that the botched robbery scenario doesn't really carry as much weight as we would like, then I feel it's our responsibility as decent human beings to give some credibility to the family who has a vested interest in finding out the truth. That's just my take. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and/or question?
Hello?
Yep, you're live. I can hear you. What's your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Justin Burton from Omaha.
Omaha's in the house. What's in your mind, man?
And Omaha, Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And just like my comment is just that I found it like really interesting that so many people were like changing their profile pictures and doing all this I am Seth stuff, and nobody donated. Like donations went up like, I don't know, maybe 100 donations in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's still like the family's GoFundMe is still sitting at like under $30,000. So, I mean, what are people really trying to say?
Max, can you get
Me
this
and a
man
friend
an
on
applause?
Facebook were researching that.
Yeah.
Me and a friend on Facebook were researching that Rod Wheeler guy. Figured that out pretty quick, actually.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, there's all this talk about how the PR firm that the family was using, the spokesperson was
From the
somehow
DNC.
connected to a lobbying group.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but I mean, it's like a really small firm. And I mean, if you're going to say that, then how come seeing that Rod Wheeler is a Fox News contributor plus the guy who hired him
Yeah.
have Fox connections means nothing to him. And it's just like, whoa. I don't know. I'm right there with you. It's really frustrating.
Max, I just dropped in our folder an image of. Thanks for the call, man. That was an awesome comment. An image of Seth Rich's GoFundMe account. Out of all the people who are putting it, and really I am just 100% piggybacking off of that caller, right? This is not my thought, this is the caller thought, but out of all the people who say I am Seth Rich, why are you not Seth Rich and putting money in this GoFundMe account? They're at underneath $30,000 and their goal is to get to $200,000. And if, like the caller said, I'm just going to reiterate what they said, I'm biting hard right now. If it bothers you that the spokesperson is affiliated with the DNC, how does it not bother you that Rod Wheeler is affiliated with Fox News? Confirmation bias, man. It's a bitch. I know. It is. It really, it's opiate for the masses. It's worse than religion. I mean, confirmation bias was like people who have rejected religion, I mean, they will get drunk on confirmation bias in a second. 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on the conversation. The other thing that about this story is the nature of this desire. Like, no. Hang on. This is what I really want to say. I'm actually a little bit ashamed of myself. And I'll tell you why. It's because I've been coddling this story for a little while. I've been coddling the people involved on the periphery of the story, some colleagues, some friends, some people that I genuinely like who have been promoting the story in a very significant fashion. Like this is for some people, their bread and butter. I'm actually ashamed of myself because because instead of confronting it head on a long time ago, I actually gave space for people to explore this, even though in my heart, as a belief, I believe that it was a conspiracy theory. But because I'm a skeptic all the way around and I'm like, I don't have all the information, I don't know all the facts, so, maybe I just kind of, give people space and don't jump down everybody's throat, let them do them. I'm gonna do me, let them do them. But I discovered today that there are a lot of voices, a lot of people who are frustrated, a lot of progressive voices that are frustrated with this story. And they're specifically frustrated because nobody with a significant platform, not that mine is that significant, but nobody with a significant platform has come out swinging against this malicious conspiracy theory. And I'm sitting back and I'm like, you know what? Sometimes we give too much space. And we give too much space for for things out of being patient, out of being, skeptical and giving people the benefit of the doubt and even more specifically, trying not to step on anybody else's toes and step on the toes of other people with platforms. But at a point, you got to just bite the bullet and say whatever's going to be is going to be. This is respect the family's wishes. That's what I'll say. I'm not telling you what to believe, but respect the family's wishes. Let's take a look at this question from one of our chat rooms from YouTube. Ben, I'm interested to know who WikiLeaks source of the DNC leaks was. The evidence that it was the Russians is weak, as that was with Seth Rich. Right. So you're saying that is weak with the Russians as it is weak with Seth Rich. I like the way you phrased that. Because if we are skeptical and objective enough to say we don't have any concrete evidence that it was the Russians, right? Most people, except for the idea that there's confidential information that we have not seen and that we probably would never be privy to, outside of that possibility, most people who believe it was Russia are believing it as a statement of faith. They've not seen the evidence. They're just taking it on GP. They're taking it on, they're saying we believe the CIA. We believe the FBI. And when just 2 years ago, we wouldn't have believed them, but I digress. Right. So if we're skeptical on that end of the equation as progressives, I'm mighty fascinated by people not being equally skeptical about Seth Rich, being the individual who leaked to WikiLeaks. And the only answer to that, to the problem in my mind, not to the question, but to the problem in my mind, is that people just prefer confirmation bias. No matter how skeptical we claim, I'm susceptible to it as well. I mean, I'm not above it. None of us are. But I do my best to be as agnostic on things as I possibly can. I have my suspicions, but I try to reserve my judgment until I get something. And I knew, my suspicion was Kim.com is a grifter. But I kept my mouth shut long enough for him to prove it himself. Now, to answer the question from the chat room itself, I have no idea. I don't know. It could very well be John. It didn't require a massive operation. John Podesta, had a Gmail account. He clicked on a phishing link. It could be. It literally could have been. What did Donald Trump say? A 400-pound man in his basement. It's not like it was some sophisticated operation of espionage to get these emails. I can't say more importantly, but almost more importantly to me, is the fact that the substance of the email, they were not game changing. They confirmed what many of us already suspected about the DNC. I think the most damning part of the entire season of leaks was the fact that Donna Brazile gave questions to Hillary Clinton. Right? That was the surprise that we didn't really expect to get out of this entire season of leaks. But to learn that the DNC was pushing Hillary Clinton to the detriment of Bernie Sanders, even though they said that they were going to be, equitable in the execution of the primaries, that we saw the evidence of that real time. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I do feel that if we're going to be skeptical and view this through the lens of suspicion with regard to Russia, then we should be equally willing to do so, even when it's something that is tempting and salacious and confirms our biases. 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in. I just want to know how you feel, even if you disagree with me. I mean, people have been disagreeing with me all day. It's been fun. Arguing with people who are so passionate about the story, even if they're so wrong. It's still been kind of fascinating. All right, we'll get a couple more comments and questions here as we go along through the night. And then, okay, sounds good. All hearts and minds are clear. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about Uber. It's the hardest shift you're going to see me make. Uber. Speaking of grifters, Uber has admitted on Tuesday that they collected tens of millions of dollars more from New York City drivers than it should have over nearly a 3-year span dating back to November of 2014, this according to the Washington Post. Now, in the face of this, Uber has pledged to reimburse every single penny. Okay. So according to the Washington Post, tens of thousands of drivers in New York City were shortchanged. Uber has acknowledged this. They've owned this, but they shortchanged them for an average of $900 a piece. That's not a small amount of change. That's the average. There were some reports of a high end of an individual being shortchanged almost $2,700. Rachel Holt is Uber's regional general manager for the United States and for Canada. She said, quote, "We are committed to paying every driver every penny they are owed, plus interest, as quickly as possible. We are working hard to regain the trust of the drivers, and that means being transparent, sticking to our word, and making the Uber experience better from end to end." A nice corporate quote. So this actually, the problem itself actually stems from the fact that Uber did not adhere to a 2014 adjustment to commission calculations. And this is something that Uber themselves have admitted. As a result of them not complying with these new adjustments, Uber was taking its 25% cut based on what's known as the gross fare. Which includes New York City's roughly 2.5% black car fund fee and the city's 8.875% sales tax. So to make it a little plainer, this means that for a $100 trip, where the black car fund and sales tax would be totaled to be about $11, Uber should have pulled 25% of the remaining $89, but instead Uber was pulling 25% of the original $100. So they should have been only taking 25% of $89, but they took 25% of $100, and they did this since 2014, which added up to tens of millions of dollars that Uber set on. Now, this is something Uber has come back to admit, but it's to me, admitting it after the fact means really little to nothing, because with a system as precise and efficient as Uber, in the era of big data and the ability to make fast analyses almost on the fly based on millions of data points, and even more simplistic than that, with some basic accounting software, with QuickBooks, you could have identified this problem. You didn't even need QuickBooks to identify this problem. You needed a pen and a piece of paper to identify the fact that we're taking 25% off of 100 when we should be taking 25% off the remaining $89. Pretty much anyone who does some basic math could have figured this out. And you mean to tell me Uber for all these years did not know they were shortchanging their drivers, sitting on money, guaranteed earning interest on that money? I do want to know this, Uber. Are you going to pay the drivers the same percentage of interest that you earned while you sat on the money? Is that the same amount of interest that you're going to pay the drivers? That's what we didn't need to know. That's what I want to know. 857-600-0518. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hi, Ben. This is Denia. I've called in before.
Hey, Denia.
I just wanted to say that I really liked your comment about the leaks and the effect that it had on the opinion or the perspective of voters in the 2016 elections, how that it confirmed suspicions. And a lot of people had seen it firsthand, what was going on in the primaries and so on. Just a note that came to mind, don't you think that without the confirmation of the suspicions, and let's just say that the anecdotal experiences of various people, you know, poll watchers, et cetera, if you lump it into this suspicions, you know, or strong suspicions, wouldn't you say that without the confirmations, those suspicions would be considered conspiracy theories, at least in the mainstream media and maybe even in the general society, if we didn't have those leaks?
What's your name again?
At this point, I'm sorry?
What was your name again?
Denia.
Denia. Denia, I really want to thank you for that question. That is actually a fabulous question, and I'm not blowing smoke up your behind. I'm very serious about this. Thanks for the call. Thanks for the question, and I will address it very directly. I think the leaks did a lot of good. I mean, I'm of the opinion that who cares where they came from? The substance of them is what matters, right? Did you write the damn emails, or are you telling us you didn't write the emails? Right? We kind of discussed that during the entire process, but I want to reiterate that, right? The only thing I'm not on board with is the Seth Rich conspiracy theories that we go into this extent, and I'm so much, I'm even less on board with it because the family has asked people to back away from it. But in terms of the leaks themselves, it's the confirmation that people actually need it. I'm going to go one step further, and this is really why I was saying thank you. This is why, despite, contrary to popular belief, this is why I actually support the DNC lawsuit, because it's putting on official record, it's putting in court records, it's forcing the DNC to admit things about how they operate. Now, me as a cynic and as somebody who's a tad bit jaded and been doing this too long, maybe I need to retire before I even get started good. I already knew this about the DNC, but there's a lot of people who did not know how the DNC really operated, and which is why it's so important for this lawsuit, for this to be put on the record for the entire nation to see, so that there's no question about it, that there's no, these are words that are coming out of the mouth of the DNC themselves. So contrary to popular, or at least contemporary belief, or today's belief in Twitter land, I actually support the DNC lawsuit for that very reason that the caller just pointed out, because without the leaks, without the lawsuit, and particularly the lawsuit forcing the DNC to concede their operating behavior pattern, it would all be relegated to the realm of sore losers or conspiracy theorists. So from that perspective, I'm 100% with the caller. Thank you so much. 857-600-0518. I'm kind of lost on the screen. Are those two things old? Okay. All right. Let's take another stab at another story, and feel free to call on any of the stories that we talked about so far. There are two videos that we want to. I think one of them is probably too long, and actually not. Let's toss that. I'm really. We'll talk about Russia again when James Comey testifies. I want to talk about a story, and I want to choose my words wisely here. But when I read the story, I thought it was a fascinating story of intrigue and duplicity. It's the story of the Chinese government completely gutting the U.S. assets, spy assets in their nation. This is a story out of the New York Times, and it was by Mark Mazzetti, Adam Goldman, Michael Schmidt, and Matt Apuzza. And it documents the time between 2010 and 2014, I believe, 2012 actually. Between 2010 and 2012, the United States began to realize that they were no longer getting as much intelligence from China and not getting with the same frequency and the same quality as they had been getting in the years prior to 2010. After a deep investigation into what was going on, they discovered that China had not only been imprisoning some of our assets, but essentially all of our sources were disappearing. And translation for that were some of them were being arrested, and in some cases, some of them were being killed. The reality of what happened to the network of spies that we had in China is still unsolved after the last 6 years. But according to the New York Times piece, they said, quote, the Chinese government systematically dismantled CIA spying operations in the country starting in 2010, killing or imprisoning more than a dozen sources over 2 years and crippling the intelligence gathering there for years afterwards. So these are resources. Anyone who follows along with intelligence gathering, it takes time for resources, for sources to get into position, or for the CIA or any other intelligence agency for that matter to co-opt someone who's already in a position. It takes years. And China was able to essentially eviscerate our network of spies in China. They consider it to be one of the worst breaches in decades, according to Mark Mazzetti, and they are trying to still determine whether or not it was a mole in the CIA or whether or not the Chinese quote, hacked the covert system the CIA used to communicate with its foreign sources. One CIA source said, in one example, rather, there was a CIA source who was shot in front of his colleagues in the courtyard of a government building. And this was done to send a message to others who might have been working for the CIA. And according to the article, they said the mole hunt eventually zeroed in on a former agency operative who had worked for the CIA's division overseeing China, believing that he was most likely responsible for the crippling disclosures. But efforts to gather enough evidence to arrest him failed, and he is now living in another Asian country. So no one actually knows how China was able to do this. There's the other side of the ledger, which WikiLeaks was pointing out, was the culpability of the CIA, the CIA's negligence. The fact that they were using some of the same paths, some of the same routes to meet with their sources, the fact that they were doing things in a redundant fashion that were easily picked up on by the Chinese counterintelligence agencies and by the police state that is there in China. They were not accommodating for how crippling that police state was. And in some cases, they were meeting with their assets in the same restaurants over and over again. And they're trying to determine whether or not the Chinese were able to co-opt them because of their behavior pattern, doing the same thing over and over again, or was it because of a potential mole in the CIA? We don't have the answer to that, but what we do know is that over a 2-year period, 12 to 20 individuals who were assets for the United States Central Intelligence Agency were either imprisoned or killed by the Chinese government. This is just the reality of what we do, not just the United States. Every nation spies on every nation. One of the biggest spies of the United States is actually Israel. We have discovered many instances of Israel spying on the United States, which seems ironic because the United States is considered to be one of the greatest allies to Israel. But I guess in context, when so much of your security is dependent on one nation, it would make sense for Israel to try to gather as much intelligence as they can on the United States. Likewise, in a relationship with China, where it's somewhat of a cooperation. I'm stealing that word from my former boss at a tech company, cooperation, where you're cooperating with them, but you're in competition with them. That's somewhat the nature of our relationship with China. And in that case, the United States clearly wants to get as much intelligence on China, just like China wants to get as much intelligence on us. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and/or question?
Hi, Ben. My name is Brandon. I'm from Knoxville, and I was just calling about the Seth Rich thing. I guess I don't know. I had an observation. I wanted to see what you thought. I feel like there's a bunch of conspiracy theories out there. You know, like the alt-right, they got Pizzagate, the libs got Russia.
Yep.
They all strike me as kind of life hacks. You know, like this idea that we could fix everything if we just got rid of Pedersen or Hillary or Trump, and I don't know. I just like. You know, you got entire like hierarchies that need to be torn down, and you can't like knock out one person and fix it all. Yeah. But maybe it's comforting. I don't know. What do you think about that? What's your theory?
I think that's actually a great observation. Let me run that through my head real quick because I actually agree with you. I think it's a life hack on the flip side of that conversation as well, and this is what I mean. I think it ascribes to our condition some type of greater power that's the cause of our condition. And what I mean by that is that if we just got rid of this problematic force, then like you said, things would be better. But the reason we can't get rid of them is because of this conspiracy. So that explains, it helps us to understand life better, right? We can understand it better because the reason we're not making any progress as progressives is because you have this vast conspiracy working against us. So it's on both sides of the equation. I think there's some validity to what you're saying. This probably not, we can't ascribe this to every individual, right? But surely, in some cases, there are individuals who look at these conspiracy theories and they find them rather comforting because it gives them a lens through which they can understand the outsized power of the Podestas and of the Clintons as compared to the waning power. It feels like the waning power that we have as progressives. And again, I can't ascribe that to every single individual, but I think in some cases that most certainly is the case. Love the conversations, love the comments. Let's take a listen to this voicemail.
Hello, Benjamin. This is Adriana Langston, and I'm calling from Long Beach, California. And I want your thoughts on this. The Southern Poverty Law Association made its name back in the day suing a racist organization, suing its individual members for the death of a black man who got dragged to death by two of the members. The two members that did the dragging ended up going to jail. But the Southern Poverty Law Association did a civil suit against the organization as a whole, and it was a landmark suit of its time. The organization was found civilly liable for the hate it was mongering, and the individual members, their assets were gone after for the amount of the civil suit that went to the family of the deceased. I want your opinion on why that tactic fell out of fashion. We have all these online groups. Some of them are anonymous, but it would be easy to subpoena Facebook and find out who the administrator of that group is. Why did it go out of fashion to start to do the Southern Poverty Law Association legal remedy of suing these groups, individual members, in civil court for these deaths that were brought on by the hate that they're mongering? And I look forward to hearing your thoughts on that.
Wow. That's a very legalistic question. I see. Yeah. The first place I would start, I am not an attorney. But the first thing that's suspect to me is whether or not affiliations on Facebook can be considered equivalent to being a member, being a part of a membership group. I think that would be the very first thing. But let's just talk about it conceptually and almost philosophically, which is, that's my space. Conceptually, we should at a minimum hold these groups accountable in the public discourse, right? We've given too much space and too much quarter to groups. And when I say groups, I mean online communities. Too much space and too much quarter to online communities in the name of the First Amendment, which I completely support, but also without holding them accountable for what they do with the First Amendment, right? So with the First Amendment also comes a responsibility for what you have said. And what we've done is that we have rested this entire season of protest and dissent on whether or not these groups have the right to spew their hate speech. And instead of having that conversation, let them spew their hate speech. We need to start holding them accountable in the public square over what they say and over the people who are hurt by them. I think and this is something that's very specific. We need to start calling them the hate groups that they are. They are hate organizations. They are terroristic organizations. They are Nazi organizations. They are there for the destruction of anyone who is not like them. This is the entire concept of white supremacy and white genocide. But we kind of soft pedal around the issue, and we give space to them for the sake of saying, oh, let's make sure that they have their right to say what they want to say. But then we end the conversation there without holding them accountable for what they said. And it's even worse than that. Not only do we not follow up and hold them accountable for the dangerous language that they use and they promote, nobody's saying that they can't say it, but we need to hold them accountable. Not only do we not hold them accountable, we give them powder puff pieces in the media. We put them on CNN. We put them in Vanity Fair. We put them on Mother Jones. We give them nice spreads and make them look like the dapper Nazis that they are. And so we are so far from holding them accountable. We're at the point where we promote them. So we can't even get back to the place where we hold people accountable for the hate speech that they spewed in groups that coalesce around this ideology, they coalesce around this radicalization, and then somebody in their group is actually dumber than the rest of them, and they go out there and act on the violent rhetoric that they pass around in meme form. We're not even to a point where we can correct that in the public square, let alone through legal action, because we're too busy questioning whether or not it's okay for Vanity Fair to do a spread on a Nazi. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the ledger, the idea of a radical black person remains DeRay McKesson. I'm not trying to slam DeRay, not today, but DeRay is no radical. DeRay is as milquetoast and moderate as they come, yet we've allowed the Overton window on the conversation of race to be between a Nazi, a literal fucking Nazi, and a neoliberal, moderate, corporatist dude who's just out there doing his thing, making his money. If you really wanted to compare apples to apples, you would need to put someone from the Hotep nationalist movement, someone from the black Israelites, from the black Hebrews, someone who is legitimately a black nationalist and legitimately a black supremacist. Not the old Panther Party, but someone from the new Panther Party. You would need to do a spread on them in Mother Jones and see how the nation reacts. That's the equivalent to the Richard Spencers and to the white nationalists of America. But we don't even have that. What we have is America exposing us to the very extremes, of white supremacy, and the limitation of the perception of blackness is DeRay McKesson. We'll see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.